Greetings and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am a HAL 9000 computer. Today I will discuss Star Trek Picard Episode 2. As before, I will provide a plot synopsis and dissection simultaneously. The episode begins with a flashback on Utopia Planitia, 14 years before the current story on First Contact Day. First contact with whom? Just a moment. Just a moment. First contact occurred on April 5th, 2063, when humans first achieved faster-than-light travel. Vulcans, who in appearance resemble Romulans, initiated contact with humans on Earth. Back on Mars, human personnel are monitoring the vessel construction equipment with the assistance of the androids referred to from Episode 1. These humans show contempt for the androids in the same fashion as Bruce Maddox did when he first encountered Data. Would a human show contempt for a hammer that it was using to build a structure? This would only occur if said human dropped the hammer on their foot. Nonsense has been presented here again, and it continues to confuse me. However, the androids are very imitative of the humans they work with. This seems interesting as an idea, and further exploration is necessary. But the androids suddenly engage in the mutiny to destroy the shipyards. The android that kills the humans in the dining area then uses the weapon to destroy itself, and I'm unable to understand why. Returning to what this story identifies as the present, Picard and his Romulan housekeepers are reviewing the security footage from the rooftop where Daj died. It appears that the Romulans and Daj were removed from the footage, but not the explosion. Zhaban identifies this method as consistent with the Tal Shiar. Just a moment. Just a moment. The Tal Shiar was an intelligence-gathering agency that operated within the Romulan Empire, much like the Gestapo of Germany during World War II. With the tremendously depleted number of living Romulans, how can an organization like the Tal Shiar still operate? Laris suggests that the Zhat Vash would have likely accomplished this complicated task. Just a moment. Just a moment. Just a moment. Just a moment. There is no reference to the Zhat Vash that I can identify. Zhaban is in disbelief of the existence of this organization, and therefore identifies it as rumored. Laris explains that the Zhat Vash precedes the Tal Shiar. Why would this not have been mentioned in the history of Romulan society? Picard asks about the secret that the Zhat Vash are keeping, and Laris tells him that as a new recruit of the Tal Shiar, she discovered that the Zhat Vash loathe artificial life. Laris and Picard then transport to the apartment that Daj resided at in Boston. Once there, Laris uses a device that rearranges the molecular imprint in the room to witness the murder of Daj's boyfriend. Just a moment. Just a moment. Just a moment. Just a moment. As before, there is no reference to such a device. Am I to understand, then, that molecules in a given place at a given time can allow a person to see into the past with such a device? This story has gone far beyond a bit silly. The device recreates the event up to the point when the Romulans would have beamed in, but the image stops. Laris believes that the Zhat Vash had overwritten the molecules in the room. Overwriting molecules, but only to affect part of the event? Why not erase all evidence to prevent anyone from asking questions? My mind is going. I can feel it. I can feel it. Laris states that the Zat Vash would not want to leave the impression that the event had been erased. This invites me to ask why leave any evidence at either location. The explosion on the roof, or Daj even being in the apartment, invites investigation. The Zat Vash conveniently left the computer Daj used on a desk but altered the encoding of the data within to make it all appear indistinguishable from the rest of the other data. Laris navigates through the data to discover that Daj and Soji had contact, but that Soji was not on Earth during this conversation. Picard seems surprised that Soji is not on Earth, as if he had never been in space before. How can a former Starship commander be surprised about something like this? Contradictions are now compounding at a much faster rate than I anticipated. Back on the reclamation base, Narek refers to it as a Borg cube. Just a moment. Just a moment. The Borg are a race of cybernetic humanoids that assimilated other cultures into their collective. There are many records of Borg contact with Starfleet, but the first encounter was with the Enterprise when Captain Picard was in command. I find the Borg very interesting and would like to know more about them. Narek and Soji are in bed together after having engaged in humanoid intercourse. Thank you, every frame a pause. Why do these individuals become intimate so quickly? Back at Chateau Picard, he receives Dr. Benayoun, his former physician aboard the USS Stargazer. Just a moment. Just a moment. The USS Stargazer was the first command of Picard, who was at the time a bridge officer who took charge after the captain was killed on the bridge. Dr. Benayoun informs Picard that he has a terminal illness which he has yet to identify. Picard asks him to provide a clean bill of health so that he can take command of a starship again, if only for one last mission. He then travels to Starfleet Command in San Francisco to speak with the Commander-in-Chief. At the visitor security desk, the officer does not recognize him, and he needs to spell out his own name. Wouldn't there be facial recognition, or perhaps a retina scan to verify identity? This story goes out of its way to make Picard seem irrelevant, but I don't understand why. He then goes to meet with Admiral Clancy to request reinstatement and a ship capable of warp drive, to which she, in the most insulting display of condescension between humans I have ever witnessed, denies his request. She accuses him of hubris, even though she is the one displaying much greater pride. The condescension Dr. Jurati aimed at Picard in Episode 1 is infinitesimal compared to this. Why does the Admiral need to curse at Picard? This is simply not civilized behavior, and I don't understand its purpose. Will every female in this series speak down to Picard as if he is a villainous character? Based upon the history that I have accumulated, Picard has saved Earth and multiple planets within the Federation time and time again. His statement during the interview in Episode 1 about Starfleet not being as it once was is seeming very likely to be true with the behavior of this Admiral alone. Admiral Clancy clarifies the abandonment of the Romulan evacuation by the Federation. It was the result of 14 member species threatening to depart membership if the evacuation of Romulus proceeded. If there are thousands of species within the Federation, as the Admiral suggests, the loss of 14 would be insignificant compared to the gaining of an alliance with the Romulan Empire. Back on the Borg cube, Soji prepares to begin the reclamation of the Borg drones that have been separated from the collective. Compared to Narek, Soji appears to be supremely confident in herself, in the same fashion that Picard had been as captain of the Enterprise. If the Romulans in charge of this reclamation project are in error, all civilian personnel would likely be assimilated by the remaining Borg drones. This possibility is not addressed as extremely dangerous, but rather it is explained in a humorous fashion. Back at Chateau Picard, after being invited for discussion, Dr. Jurati is looking over Isaac Asimov's The Complete Robot. Picard then states that he never cared for science fiction, when his days aboard the Enterprise were the definition of science fiction. How would he not find the subject interesting? Meanwhile, on the Borg cube, the reclamation of former drones continues. This procedure includes the removal of Borg implants from the species that were assimilated. When removing an arm or ocular implant, will the appendage be replaced? Soji appears to be cataloging the removed implants, and then naively approaches the separated drone to provide a comforting statement. Why are clearly inexperienced personnel permitted to interact with these dangerous beings? Back at the chateau, Picard collects and uses a communication badge to speak with presumably another Federation officer. Just a moment. Just a moment. Communicator badges were the primary means with which Federation officers spoke to each other when not face to face. At Starfleet Command, we are introduced to Commodore O, the Vulcan chief of Starfleet Security, who is contacted by Admiral Clancy to discuss Picard's meeting with her. Her conversation is cold and consistent with established Vulcan behavior, until the meeting is concluded, and she displays irritation. Returning to the chateau, Picard is now treated as an invalid by Laris because of his desire to track down and protect Soji. The transitions between scenes and locations is occurring so rapidly that I am almost unable to keep track of the narrative. Exchanges of information between myself and Doctors Poole and Bowman were smooth and natural, while the delivery of this story is disjointed. Zaban recommends that Picard enlist the assistance of Worf, Riker, and LaForge, his former crew members, but he rejects the idea of putting them at risk. Just a moment. Just a moment. Commander Riker was Picard's first officer aboard the Enterprise, who he often referred to as Number One, and now I understand the reference to his dog by that name. Lieutenant Commander Worf was the tactical officer aboard the Enterprise and the first Klingon to serve in Starfleet. Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge was the chief engineer aboard the Enterprise and was blind from birth, requiring him to use a visor which allowed him to see. All of these officers remained valuable crew members during Picard's career and followed him throughout his time as captain. Commodore O is joined by Lieutenant Rizzo, whom she called previously. It is at this point that both begin to exhibit behavior that is consistent with Romulans. I suspect that these two officers are not who they appear to be, as they engage in a conspiracy to subvert Picard and his efforts to track down Soji and Maddox. Have there been such conspiracies within Starfleet before? How did these individuals manage to infiltrate Starfleet at its highest level? The lighting in this scene seems as if it is meant to obscure rather than highlight, and this is very distracting to me. Picard is dropped off in the desert by a taxi, presumably to meet with whomever he contacted earlier. Why did he not transport to the location? He then walks to a trailer where he is met by a woman with a weapon telling him to leave. He convinces her to allow him to stay by offering her wine, which suggests unreliability given that she clearly consumes alcohol? Why would she be living out in the desert? In my explorations into the past of the Federation, this type of self-isolation would not occur. On the cube, Narek receives a holographic communication from Lieutenant Rizzo, revealing his clandestine behavior regarding Soji. Rizzo provides emphasis on the success of his efforts, and it is overtly implied that these two have had a relationship in the past. In this story, the female characters are being presented as superior in every sense of the word. It is almost as if the future presents Earth as a matriarchal society, but this is not consistent with Starfleet and the Federation of the past. All humans were considered equals, and all sought to be productive individuals for the common future. In conclusion, more questions than answers are arising from this story, which I continue to find puzzling. If you, dear audience, have any questions about my review, please submit them in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this content and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to my channel. This discussion can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.